how this works. Can you hold it?
Don't be nervous. Will that turn though?
Yeah.
Gotta look up there. Look. You. Where's it going?
They're going to try to get some chairs.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be good.
Oh, okay. You know, this thing's already going.
Keep on there. I've got one. Okay.
I can't read it. You want to turn it around?
I'll just have to look at it, I guess.
Okay.
What? Yep. I'll clear them out.
You want this on your back pocket, side pocket?
How does it work?
I think it just sits behind your ears, and then you just talk into the mic. Or you can do it like that if you don't want it on top of your head. It's not on yet. Now it's on. Where did my phone go?
I don't know.
Do you have it?
I wear one of these things.
I think it goes like over your ears behind my ears. No, use my phone. You're good. Take it up.
How do we make that content? Can you guys on YouTube see anything? Yes. You can see me? Okay, cool. They can. I'll have to set this up. Oh, that's pretty cool, I guess. Okay.
Stand back here, hopefully. I can hear it, and I can hold still. Put it on the outside of your pocket, I think.
Hello. Testing 1, 2, 3. Everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay. I guess the live video is going. Okay. James Brelli says it's going.
Yeah, he's up there.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm super nervous. My name's Mark. You guys, we're here at Bass Pro Shop in Kodak, Tennessee, and we are going to talk about striper fishing and catfish fishing today. I guess first we're going to start off with, if you don't know who I am, my name's Mark. I went to school at the University of Tennessee, and I've been fishing my whole life. Started fishing in the Clinch River with my dad. God, well, I get emotional. When I was younger, and I don't know, I love fishing. So, the striper fishing thing and the catfishing thing started when I was probably in college. And it's kind of an addiction and a passion at the same time. I had been fishing my whole life for, bluegill, trout, bass, all of the above with my friends and family, mostly my family, and mostly in farm ponds. And then I caught a catfish on accident on a piece of shad with my cousin from a kayak. And it was like 15 pounds, and it towed me around Mount Hill Lake. So at that point, I was like, all right, this is super cool. I really like this, and I want to try to catch more and bigger catfish. In that process, when you're doing that, you accidentally catch stripers. So that's what started the striper boat. I caught my first striper fishing for bait for catfish below Fort Loudon Dam, and then that started a new crazy bug there. So the first seminar today is going to be on trophy striper fishing. And I'm going to start out with, I am not the end-all be-all knowledge on this, but I do it a lot, and I am friends with a lot of the best guys who do it. So I try to surround myself with the oldest guys who are the most knowledgeable and wise, and the smartest people at whatever fish I'm trying to do, because I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I am the most passionate about this stuff. So basically the gist of what I want to talk about here for both the striper and the catfish is just 101, how you get started doing it, what is striper fishing, which is what we're going to cover right now, and how you get started, what bait do you use, what tackle, what do stripers do, what are stripers, because that's pretty cool, and then we'll go into as much detail as I can on a seminar on how to striper fish. But what you learn here, you got to apply out there. And my goal is for you to be able to leave here and go to your home lake or river with some of the things I've learned and apply them and catch fish on your own. That would be my end goal for this. So again, my name is Mark Cooper. I quit my full-time sales job to do YouTube. And so that's my main gig. I have the channel Top Knox Fishing, which is what a lot of people here, I guess, watch me from. And then I sell bait on the side, and I'm finishing up my U.S. Coast Guard captain's license right now so I can guide this spring. So I'm not doing that yet. I get a lot of questions about that. If you're wanting to fish right now in the winter, I can refer you to some of my buddies, but I'm not guiding you. That'll be this spring. But without further ado, we're going to start with the striper fishing thing. And I don't know how to do the seminar stuff, so I'm going to walk around and click buttons, I guess. All right. So seminar overview. Why do we fish? I mean, that's the first question I always ask myself before I do anything. And whether you're wanting to catch the biggest fish or the most fish or whatever, there's got to be a reason why you're out there doing it. And why do I do it? Well, I like sharing the outdoors with other people. That's my passion. It's helped me a whole lot in my life growing up, and I try to use that to help others. So that's why I do it. And striper are big and cool, and they pull a lot of drag, and you have fun doing it. Presentation highlights, so we're going to talk about bait, the tackle. I've got it all laid out here. Striper biology, what they do, and their seasonal habits, the different methods to catch them. Again, this is not going to be every method to catch them or the exact way to catch them. This is just how I found success doing it. And then species conservation, because these fish are stocked. They don't naturally reproduce very well. So you got to take care of them. You can't kill all the big fish. Okay, so why do you want to striper fish? Well, one, they're probably one of the hardest fighting fish in fresh water. They'll test your gear, they'll test your manhood or your womanhood, and they'll break your back and break all your gear and pretty much everything else. It's super fun. So there's multiple different kinds of striper fishing. You can fish for schoolie stripers on like Cherokee and Douglas and have a bunch of fish. Or you can go after trophy fish in the rivers and lakes and catch a big giant one. That's like you go all day and maybe catch one. There's different methods to do it. So you can do the live bait or the artificial. The live bait's generally the most effective because you're feeding the fish and not fooling them. And then, again, you can do fast dashing or trophy fishing, and it's always an adventure. You could be up a trout river in middle or east Tennessee catching a 50-pound striper, or in the middle of the lake in 100 feet of water catching 100 schoolies. So there's a million different ways to do it, and they're all equally fun. It just kind of depends on what you want to do. So, bait. Feed them or fool them. Now, bait is going to be the most critical part of catching a striper, whether that's live bait or on cut bait. Now, generally, most of the time, we're going to be using live bait. And there's all different kinds of live bait. So you've got gizzard shad, redfin shad, alewives, skipjack herring, trout, and then you've got your artificial bait. And people catch them on bluegills, shellcrackers, all the other things. But really, the big three are gizzards, redfin, well, big four. What's on there? Those are the main ones. With most of your trophy fish, a lot of times come on skipjack herring, trout, and big alewives. I mean, you can catch them all and everything. But I generally use skipjack. The next thing we're going to talk about is where do you find these shad and skipjack and all these other things, and how do you catch them. So gizzard and threadfin shad are probably the most popular bait fish there is in the catfish or the striper world. So lots of different ways to catch them. Primarily it's a cast net. So yeah, that's how you do that. So now I'm probably going to make some people mad here, but I'm going to show you exactly where and how to catch them throughout the year. So when you're looking for gizzard shad, they have seasonal patterns just like all the other fish. They spawn, they run upriver, they go back in the cove, all these different things. But in general, the best place to find shad all year are going to be in these large tributary systems, which are creeks off the main lake. The most success I find is when you have a really muddy one in the back of a creek and it opens up into a big shallow flat. So this is down in Alabama, and this particular area is loaded in shad, but you could look for this same type of stuff on any lake in the whole country, and just depending on the time of year, you'll find shad in there. What you really want to look for is a deep creek channel from the main channel moving back into a bay that opens up really flat in the 5 to 7 feet of water. Other areas you can catch them are at dams, spillways, and hot water discharges. These can be super dangerous, and I try to keep people away from these areas as much as possible unless you've got somebody who knows what they're doing. So I'm not going to really talk about that a ton, but we'll talk about where you catch them on main lakes and how I catch them. So during the cold months, during the early part of the day, they're usually pretty deep because shad, especially the redfin, are really fragile fish, and harsh cold weather really negatively affects them. So when it's the coldest part of the day, early in the morning, usually they're out deep in the main creek channel. And then as the day progresses and it gets warmer, if it gets warmer, and the sun's out, it'll start to warm up these backwater coves, especially if they're muddy. It'll hold warm water better. So at that point, they start moving from these main creek channels to the main river ledge back inside of these tributary arms to feed on plankton. During the colder months, they're slower, so they don't move around as fast. Now, spook is easy with the boat, and they're easier in net. So a lot of times you can do a one-and-done throw this time of year and have all your bait for a day if you locate it. During the warm months, low light conditions are generally when I have the most luck. But during that time of the year, they're more active and they're harder than that because they spook away from the boat really easily. During the summer, early morning, late evening, and really at night are prime times to go and catch your bait. During the middle of the day, it can be really, really tough. They move out to the main channel when it's super hot. So that's kind of the general area where you can find them. I think I put a couple other pictures here. And if you guys are new to this stuff and don't know what we're looking at here, this is called a topographical map. So it shows the ledges and all the drop-offs, all the river systems, and most of them throughout the country. And this is what really most fishing success comes from, is learning this topographical map stuff. I can't really go into a lot of detail on it right now because we'll be here for hours, but that's what we're looking at. I've got more stuff on my YouTube page if you want to learn how to read topography for all different kinds of fish. It's basically all the same, it's just slightly different for each species based on what they do. And the guy who came up with all this stuff with topography, his name was Buck Perry. He's got a big giant book series, he's super crazy smart, smarter than me. A lot of it's way over my head, but I've read through all of them, and that's basically what all my fishing based around. So this is a topographical map, and this is areas where I have caught shad and could catch them right now. So we can kind of see these two open bays right here. One of them is a little bit shallower, and one of them is a little bit deeper. This one is going to be the better one overall because they get better access to deep water, and it opens up a little bit better. So again, during the times when the shad are inactive, they're going to be out here in the main channel, and you'll have to mark them on your graph. And I've got some pictures of the shad on the graph here in a second that'll show you what they look like. And then at that point, you got to put a net on. They're easier to net when they're up shallow to a degree. So like 5 to 7 feet seems to be the easiest where they're the least spooky, but shallow enough where the net falls really quickly on them. When they're up in like 2 or 3 feet, they get real spooky and you got to launch the net really far. So that's something to consider. I really like the 10 to 5 foot, somewhere in there, that range for dental shad. But sometimes they'll be in a foot of water. It's crazy. So the next thing we'll talk about is shad catching methods, and that's the cast net. There's a lot of different kinds of cast nets, different lengths, different sizes, different mesh sizes. The mesh size on a cast net is basically the little squares inside of it. That's your mesh size, and the size of that mesh is made for what kind of bait you're trying to catch. So the smaller the mesh size, the smaller the bait you're going to catch, and the slower it sinks. The bigger the mesh, The faster it sinks and the bigger the bait you'll catch. So I'm sure you guys have ever thrown a cast net before you throw it on a thread fin spool and you get Christmas tree, and that's not what you want. So if you're trying to trophy striper fish, in general, the bigger bait is going to be better. So you're going to want to use a net that matches that, makes it easier for you to catch them, and not catch all the little tiny ones you have to pick them out of your net for days, or if you're like me, you leave them in your net and a boat just sinks. So what I use for that, for shallow shad, is an 8 to 10 foot cast net. I'm not sponsored by any company. It doesn't really matter which one you get. There's a lot of different ones. Dents, Jollyfish, they're all really good. It just depends on who you want to support. And I use an 8 to 10 footer, and you want to look for 1.5 pounds of lead per foot or greater. The heavier it is, the harder it is physically for you to throw, but it sinks way quicker, so you catch way more bait. So you want a really heavy net to net your shad. And then for your deep water shad, these are hard to catch. You've got to have electronics to see where they're at, or just get lucky. But I use my electronics to mark the schools of them when they're out deep. And then when they're past 15 feet, we use this thing called a tape net. And this is especially effective this time of the year. So a tape net, you can see around the rim of this net right here, it has basically a mesh, or you can put duct tape, but this is made with a mesh that when it's falling down through the water column, the resistance of the water hitting that net as it falls, the tape keeps it open. And so it'll stay open down deeper. It sinks slower, that's the only bad part, but you can catch your deep water shad then. And anything past 15 foot, I'm usually throwing that, and it'll like make a world of difference, especially this time of the year. When other people can't catch bait or can't, just have to go buy it for me. You can use this and catch it. So that's basically the tools you need to catch shad, and now we kind of know where they're at and how to catch them. There's a lot of videos online showing you how to throw a net. Now we're going to look at what do gizzard shad and threadfin shad look like on a graph. Now gizzard shad generally are the bigger ones. They can be little baby ones, but when you're fishing gizzard shad, you want to look for the bigger ones, the trophy fish. And the photo on the left here, this is a down scan image of gizzard shad 2D and side scan. You can see the individual little pebbles or marks in there that's different. Like you can see individual fish. These are good sized gizzard shad here. That's what you're going to want to look for if you're scanning around your graph. Side scan is really useful for this, and live scope. I used that for the first time the other day. That was awesome. I don't have any pictures or anything of that yet, but that was like next level, like easy catching bait. After that, you've got your threadfin shad here. Those look like mist or smoke. That's threadfin shad. Sometimes alewives look like this. I'm not the most experienced alewives catcher because I don't fish like to have them, but that's what your threadfin look like. This is also good to know for threadfin when you're fishing for skipjack, because that's what they eat. So you want to be in areas where you see this in your graphs or you see them dimpling on the surface. I realize it's a lot of like minutia and like really weird details, but like in the long run, this will save you like hundreds of hours in the water and thousands of dollars chasing these things. So this is kind of what you want to look for. I've got more detailed videos on my YouTube page, like while I'm out on the water scanning for them and throwing my net on them. You guys can look that up there. So next, we're going to talk about my favorite thing to catch in the world, and that's the skipjack herring. I'm the world record holder for skipjack. My buddies have caught some bigger ones that have been turned in, but I turned it in and sold a lot of bait for it because of college. So these are the most daggone fun things to catch in the world when they're on easy. So I'm going to they're 4 pounds, 3 ounces. And they're a blast to catch. So right now, I actually brought a lot of stuff to show you what to use to catch it. So rod-wise, we got 3 of them here. I'm probably going to drop stuff. So I'm going to move this over. Yeah, so I got that verified, and then we immediately went out and chopped it up. That Mike Jolly, couldn't believe I was about to do that. I was like, well, whatever. That's the TWR agent who verified it for me, and one of my other friends, Perry Massengill, was watching it. He took that photo. So great guys, T-Dub. The reason why we get to do all this is stock all the stripers, awesome guys. So now we're going to talk about one of my favorite things in the world is catching skipjack. Again, literally the best bait I found for big trophy stripers and catfish, and they're a blast to catch. There's a billion different ways to catch them, but I'm going to show you what I found are the most effective ways to do it and the gear I use to do it. So all three of these rods are around 7 foot, and they're a fast action with a strong backbone. And the reason why you want that is because these things are little tarpons, basically. They've got really bony mouths, they jump out of the water, and they're really difficult to keep hooked and catch. So you need something that you can cut the hook in and keep them in. So the different flavors of rods, I really like St. Croix. The inshore rods by Okuma are great too. I'm sponsored by them, but there's a million different things in the world you can skipjack on. But you just want to look for that action. 7 foot, fast action tip, like it bends quickly and then goes to a steady backbone. And then reel-wise, this is very important and what a lot of people overlook. Is speed on your reel. When you're standing next to somebody at the dam or you're in a creek or whatever, if there's more than 10 people there, there's always some dude who's catching more bait than everybody else, and they're throwing the same thing as everybody else. And generally that's because his speed's different on his reel. So he's bringing his bait in more quickly or more slowly, or he's letting it sink. But that's like the critical key here. If you and your buddy are using the exact same rod, exact same reel, exact same bait, and he's out catching you, then it's probably because he's either reeling it more quickly or letting it sink and get deeper. So when I'm out fishing, I use different gear ratio reels, a really fast reel, a moderate, and a slow reel, and then I just work my way through it. I start on the fast one because if they're active, they're really easy to catch. On the fast one, you can haul them in really quickly, but then if they're not, I just work my way down. Generally, the first thing I start throwing if I'm going skipjack fishing is going to be a sabiki rig. I tie these myself. These are just doll flies you can get anywhere throughout the country. I think these are 16-ounce ones. And color is not the most important thing in the world. I just go with generic white with a red head. And then I use a 25-pound mono leader because when you're throwing multiple jigs like this, they get tangled on thinner diameter line. So you got to use a thicker line. And then for your main line, you want braid because braid has zero stretch. You can throw it further and set the hook way easier on the skipjack, and that'll immediately up your bait game. And then the next way to catch them, especially when you're at dams, is a pulley spin on a trolling sinker. So this is a 2-ounce trolling sinker. I don't know what brand it is, but it's basically just some lead with some swivels on either end. And then you attach your leader onto it, and then your pulley spin. And pulley spins have all different colors and sizes. You just got to work through all the different sizes until you figure out what they want. So this lets you throw it way out in the current, let it sink, get it deep, or work it up high. And then another tip that I found really helps catch a bait if skipjacks are blowing up all over the top of the water and you literally can't get them to eat anything. Like you throw a sabiki rig on top of them, or you throw a pulley spin on top of them, and they won't hit it. You switch over to a popping cork. And so this thing keeps it up higher in the water column, and you can work it more slowly. And I found when they're busting and can't get them to hit anything else, popping cork is the way to go. And all right, where do we find skipjack? Well, the main place everybody catches them, and the easiest place to catch them most of the time of the year, is at dams, spring to fall. They do a spawning run just like striper in the early part of the year, usually starting in March, and they stay there most of the year. That's the best place to catch them. If you're new to it, watch the generation schedules go when they're generating water at the dams, and you'll probably catch them from March to April. Another place in the winter months are hot water discharges. There's not many left around the country, but if you find one that's got skipjack in the lake and it's putting out hot water, they're going to be there in the winter. In terms of main lakes, and this is where it gets hard and a lot of people struggle, catching skipjack on main lakes. It's very similar to gizzard shad and redfin in the same general areas because that's what they feed on, a small gizzard shad, redfin, and flies. So they're going to be near the other schools of bait we've already looked at. And when you're going to look to catch the striper or the striper's bait, we're going to look at the creek systems, splash off the main channel, points off the main channel, and then in terms of rivers, where you catch them out in river systems, whether that's the Clinch, the French Rod, or the Cumberland shoals, where it gets really shallow on top of a rock shoal and it has a little cut through on the side will be there. Current seams and eddies are all a good place to look. Now, there can be a million different current seam eddies and shoals on a river, and none of them have them, and then you roll up on one that finally has them. That's just something you got to like experiment with until you find it. They just roll around. It's tedious sometimes, but you got to do it. All right, so trout and alewives, I don't really use these a lot, just because I don't really have a source to buy trout there in North Carolina. But trout in the trout waters is excellent. You can buy them from bait shops. You can catch them on legal rod and reel tackle, and if they're within the creel limit or what you can keep, you can legally use it for bait. They work great, and they're really easy to keep alive over a skipjack. And then alewives are, again, another pelagic bait fish, but people catch them under lights at night with sticky rigs, small jigs, and cast nets. I'm not the most experienced with this, but you cannot transport these things out of lakes because they're not really invasive. PWRA released them in our lakes, but they found that they harm the walleye population of those things. So don't transport these guys. You've got to use them where you catch them, basically. But it looks like a mini skipjack. They work really well. They got really big googly eyes. All right. Now I want to talk about gear. Everybody likes gear. There's a lot of ways to catch a striper, and your gear's got to match it. Your gear is just a tool for the job. What tool are you going to use to fish for these fish determines the type of effort you're doing. So we've got trolling rods or float rods, downline rods, artificial rods, all your different type of rod and reel setups you're going to use. And then we're going to talk about main line, your leader line, hooks, planer boards, floats, and we already talked about nets, and then we're going to talk about scales too. But this is where we take the bait. All right, we caught our bait, we know where the bait's at, and we're going to use it to fish with. I'm not really going to go into how to keep a bait alive on this because it's just a lot to it. But basically, the number rule of thumb I found for keeping bait alive is volume of water is the best. So the bigger the bait tank you got, usually the better. And the cleaner, the fresher the water, and the lower the water temperature, the better your bait will stay alive. I run a 100-gallon horse trough bait tank that has roto-motor with a lid on top, and I can keep 12 to 13 skipjack alive with a bubbler in it when the water's clean. You're going to put salt in there. Don't ever use defoaming agents to kill your bait. So, all right, let's talk about rods and reels. Actually, I guess we're talking, I didn't have a slide for that. All right, I'll talk about rods and reels. So, lots of different striper rods on the market, but basically a catfish rod will work for a striper rod for pulling planer boards. So what I use for pulling my planer boards are big cat beaver rods, usually a medium, heavy to a heavy, because when I'm striper fishing, I like to be in the rivers, and like if you hook up with a big fish on a really nasty section of river, you have to back rubber pull them out. So you got to use big gear. I use 65-pound test braided mainline with a 50-pound test fluorocarbon leader. Sometimes more than that. It just depends on how nasty it is and how much I got to crank the drag down. One thing that people usually debate about in the striper world is like line size and whether you can get bit or not. Well, I've caught stripers on a 100-pound mono in crystal clear water. So I don't really have an answer for that. Sometimes it seems like you get bit on smaller line better. Sometimes it doesn't. I don't have an answer for that. You can experiment with it. I personally don't go less than 50 because I don't want to break off a fish with stuff in its mouth. I don't have to. So I go heavy. All right, so this rig right here is called a stinger hook rig for stripers. And what that is for using big live bait. So I've got 3 or 4 feet of my leader line here. And then I've got a barrel swivel with just a small weight. Sometimes I go weightless. It helps to keep the skipjack or the big gizzard down. And then that leads down to our main hook. And now, what I like using for striper fishing on pulling my boards are the Gamakatsu Octopus J hooks and 8 or 9 or 10 off, just depending on your bait size. And then on most of them, I'll run a stinger rig. And striper have a really bad habit of coming up and nipping at your bait and just missing it or killing it, like they're just buttholes sometimes. So I started using stinger rigs after I missed a billion fish from just not having a hook in the back of them. So there's a lot of different ways to tie our stinger rig. Some guys use mono from the hook to your stinger rig. I use braid. I learned this trick from Ralph Dawes and President Flintock. I read an in-fisherman article explaining that they use the braid because it doesn't inhibit how the skipjack swims, and that makes sense to me. So I usually go 80 to 100 pound braid on it, and the stripers don't care. Like, they don't care. And then you run down to your 2 times strong treble hook, and the size of that just kind of depends on how big your bait is. I don't like going with smaller hooks. I find I have a lower hookup ratio. So normally, what size do you think that is? I don't know, pretty big, size of a quarter. But you want to make sure it's 2 times strong because they'll bend you out. So that's the stinger rig. And then a standard rig is just a single hook and with smaller bait. So if you want to up your chances of catching a big fish and using big bait, you got to use a stinger rig like that. It helps you out. In terms of floating baits, so a lot of people, when they start out skipjack fishing, will float one on a balloon. And that is how I started doing it. And most of the time, when I was first doing it, I was from the bank, and it was really hard to set the hook at a distance when my bait would get eaten out in the channel on a blow it dam or in a creek or whatever. So I switched over to really long musky rods because you get a better hook set from a distance. So if you're floating a bait out, whether it's below a dam or on a river or from the bank in a main lake, if you have a longer rod, it just makes the hook set easier with a balloon bait. And you can also, when you're using a rod like this that's really heavy, like this is rated for up to 16 ounces, you can take your skipjack and flip them up in the trees and just do a whole lot of other stuff with it. So you really need a beefy rod for that. And then the final rod that I'm going to show for live bait fishing for stripers is going to be your downline rod. And this is where you're fishing directly underneath the boat, and whether you're in deep water or in shallow, downline rods can be really effective. And again, I just use a catfish rod essentially, but I have a reel with a line counter on it so I know what depth it's at. And if you're fishing these deeper lakes like Cherokee or Norris or any of the other highland reservoirs, is what they're called, really deep and clear, downlining is probably the most popular way to target stripers there. So having a line counter to know exactly where your bait's at is super helpful. But even though I don't do that a lot, I will run a downline rod 2 to 3 feet underneath the motor of the boat. We call it a transient rod. And I've been in 50 to 60 feet of water on the main lake and had a big giant striper blow a bait up next to the motor and like right at the surface, like hit it against the side of the boat. So that's something to always have down. It's a transient bait. You can run a skipjack or a gizzard. If you're running a skipjack, you're going to have to use like 6 ounces of weight to keep them underneath the boat. You're going to just swim all over the place and snag stuff up. So that's your downline rod. Again, I don't downline a ton just because I don't fish those lakes, the Highland Reservoir lakes that are super deep. Mostly pull boards and float baits and throw artificial. So now we're going to get into like my favorite thing to do when it comes to striper fishing is throwing artificial for them. And this has become more and more popular throughout the years, throughout the time period I've done it. And my friend Chris Bryant in Middle Tennessee is kind of like the glide bait savant for catching big giant stripers from a kayak on artificial. And he's really taught me a lot about these fish and how they relate to river systems and whatnot. So shout out Chris if you're watching. But my favorite way to target stripers in river situations is with a glide bait. And there are all different kinds of glide baits. Bring this up to the camera. This is a custom one. It's about an 8-incher. It kind of mimics a skipjack, but glide baits are really effective at getting neutral to inactive fish to bite. So we come over an area and pull glide bait over it, like a live skipjack right over its head, and it didn't come out and eat it. And then we go back with this glide bait and you work it nice and slow and kind of walk back and forth, and you can pull up those neutral or inactive fish and get them to eat this. And then when you got an active striper and you're fishing a current seam behind a boulder or something like that, you throw one of these glide baits out, it'll about rip the rod out of your hand. They hit it so hard. And I found that this has become my favorite way to catch a striper is throwing these big glides of big swim baits. So this is a custom-made one. But here at Bass Pro, they have a lot of different ones that'll work. They've got these Arashis. They have these Spros right here. And then they have these big weight baits that you can use on top as well. But for using these baits, I'm in shallow river situations where they run up in the spring and the summer. So if you've got a lake or a river that has stripers in it, and at the head of it, it's got a cool water lake, they're going to be up in there in the spring and summer, and they're going to stay throughout the summer. I'm not going to tell you what lakes to go to or rivers to fish, but you can figure it out based on that and go do the work. So in terms of the rod I use, this is just a swim bait rod from Okuma, and then reel-wise, I use these Okuma Komodos, and I use it for everything because you can do everything with it. That's why I like it. I've got 25 pounds of drag, and I put the 65-pound head braid on. Like they're just workhorses, and like you see on my other rods, you can put them on anything and use them for practically everything. I've caught grouper on the ocean with them, snook. Like it's just a great reel to use when you want to catch a bunch of different kinds of big fish. And now we're going to talk about how do we present our bait to stripers. We talked about floats and balloons, that's pretty self-explanatory, but my favorite way to catch them on live bait is with a planer board. And basically what a planer board does is when you've got your trolling motor in the water and you're pulling forward, the water hits the side of this board and the pressure of it pushes it out away from the boat. And so that allows you to run multiple baits and cover more water, and you can be really accurate with them because unlike a float, you can keep this bait pretty much where you want it when you're pulling it with the trolling motor. Now, a big skipjack, like a 2 or 3 pounder, will try to swim these around, and that's something you just got to bite. But in general, you can be really accurate with these planer boards and put them up in the heavy cover areas that striper will hang out at and catch a lot of fish doing this. And this is useful in rivers, main lakes, pretty much everywhere there's a striper, you can pull planer boards and catch them, depending on the time of year. So those are awesome. This is a new brand called Alpha Boards. I've used a bunch of different kinds of planer boards. I found that these will pull out further at slower speeds. And that is really, really critical when you're striper fishing, especially for big fish. So if you've got a big striper that's just kind of looking at your bait, you can see him coming up and popping on the top. If you're going too fast sometimes, they'll just blow right by him and won't eat it. But if you can slow it down and still keep that bait where that fish is at on the current seam or eddy or whatever, it really helps you. So if you really need a board that will pull a big bait out at slow speed if you need to. So these are great. They're Alpha Boards. You can get them online. But people make them and they work. Like, I'm not the type of guy that'll tell you got to use one thing to catch a striper or a catfish. Use what works for you. And then what we got? So we're going to talk about stripers now and what they do. Now that we know the gear, the bait, the gear, where we fish on that. So striper are originally saltwater fish. And during the springtime, they ran up, or they run up the estuaries and rivers on the Chesapeake Bay and everything along the coast. And it's called an anadromous fish. I can't remember how to say it. I'm going to write it down. But basically, they have this urge in the spring when the water tip hits 50 to 55 to shoot up the rivers to try to spawn. They do that in freshwater, though not as productive actually spawning. That's where they go in the spring, the bulk majority of it. So the springtime is generally your best time to target a big giant fish, especially if you're new to it. A lot of them will be up in the river systems. Again, wherever a striper lives in the lake, a lot of them will go up in the river. So during the summer, they like to hang out where there's cool water. So stripers don't like hot water and they die really easily if you catch them in hot water. So once we get to the warmer months and the water temp gets above 70, I don't fish for them on the main lakes anymore because they have a really high mortality rate when you catch them and the water's hot. So I will stay up in the rivers where the water temp is in the 60s or in the 50s, even throughout the summer, and I'll target them there. They will be deep in main lakes, so if you're fishing a lake with a lot of schoolie stripers that you're going to want to keep and eat, that's where you can go and do that. They'll be on underwater humps way out in the middle of the river channel. If there's underwater springs that have oxygen coming up from them, they'll be there. But again, if you catch one of these fish down deep, they're probably going to die. So just be aware of that. And again, these fish are stocked, so you have to be very cognizant of that. Like, they don't reproduce like catfish or bass do. So if TWRA stops stocking them and we kill a bunch of them, we don't have big stripers anymore. So I advise people to stop fishing for big fish on main lakes during the summer for that reason. Target them up in rivers with heavy gear so you can get them in quick and release them. Fall and winter can be some of the best striper fishing I've found on main lakes, and they're in those creek systems and on main lake structures. So we're going to talk about, what is main lake structure. So again, this is going to go back to Buck Perry. We're looking at the topography of the lake, the map of the bottom. And that's this is where the fish move around. This is how they see the world, is through the bottom of the lake. Really good areas for target stripers or on the main lake is topography, which is bottom contours, points, humps, and stuff that are near the main channel. So deep water is the home of the fish. And when they get active, they can stay active in shallow or in the deep water, or they can choose to move up shallow to become active depending on the conditions. And when they become active, they use like the bottom contours, like I'm forgetting the word from rusty it is, but they use predictable paths. So these points running off of this island over here are running basically all the way out to this main channel. So that's what those fish use to come up and become active. It's like a map for them to come up and push those bait fish up on top of that. Now, how do you fish these areas? The best way to fish these main lake points or these islands is pulling boards if you need to. You can throw artificials and throw A-rigs and stuff like that, but that's really advanced stuff. We're going to talk about pulling fly bait on top of it. So this is where your boards come into play. You can take your boat and pull up these points and fingers and have your bait coming all across the top of them. Now, a lot of the times, they're going to be, the active fish will be up on this really shallow stuff, 10 feet of water, sometimes less, next to that deep water. So when your board will come up over the top of it, you'll be like, there's not going to be a fish there, and it just gets trained on the top of it. Again, that's what you want to look for, are these main lake topography, islands, points, humps that are near the deep water to pull your bait across the top of. Again, I have more of this reading topography on my YouTube page. This is really how you catch fish. This is the bread and butter, the catfish, bass, striper, all of it. This is how the pros win all the money. They understand this stuff right here. So this is my goal, is just to expose you guys to structure fishing. And then again, these are a creek system, really good to fish in the fall and winter. And then this is called a shoal on a river section. I don't know what river this is from. I just pulled this off Google stock images. But in river sections, these striper will run all the way up until they can't run anymore. Or they'll run through areas where they can run through. So like on this, striper aren't going to go past it. So they're going to stack up in these areas in front of it during the spring and summer because they can't go any further. It's basically the same thing as a dam. It impedes their migration route. Now on rivers as well, we have these things called cattle chutes. And that's where you've got a shoal that runs out from one side of the river and has a deep cut on one side of it. And that cut is where they have to go through. And generally, when you have one of those cattle chutes, it'll be a shallow ripple, then it'll drop off into a hole below it. And then big strikers will be sitting in that hole below it, and you can catch them in the hole. And when they get really active, they'll push up on top of those shallow ripple sections. And that's a great time to throw these glide baits out, swim baits, wake baits, to target those strikers. Now, when you're in these rivers, you've got to be really careful. I've knocked off several props in my boat, and it's all ding the track. I don't have a jet boat. But that's the kind of stuff I target in the summer, up rivers, for stripers on artificial. And then, again, this is just a diagram of what pulling planer boards looks like. You've got a couple boards off the sides, floats off the back, and basically spreading out the water you're covering with your live bait, and you can be really accurate with it because you've got these boards keeping them right on the ledges or right on the course where you want them. So that's pulling a board. Now when you've got totally inactive stripers that won't eat anything, they won't hit live bait, they won't hit an artificial, you can't get them to do anything, that's when you go to cut bait. And that's when you're sitting up like you're catfishing, middle of a hot summer in a hole in one of those rivers, or even in the winter when the water temp gets really, really low and their activity period is not as high, if you know the striper in the area, that's when you want to go to cut bait. A lot of times we'll free line the cut bait, no weight on the bottom, but if you're in a river where there is current, you just cut bait like you're catfishing. And that's when you want to target neutral or inactive fish. And that's like the last resort for me. But I'll do it. I just want to catch fish. A lot of guys won't do that. And, I guess that's it. That's the general gist of striper fishing. I didn't cover fishing at the dams, throwing shad in the boil, or anything like that because there's a billion other things about that online, and like those are dangerous. 3 people have died below Loudon in the last few years. So like, I'm trying to keep people away from the dams as much as possible and teach them how to catch stripers in other areas that are safer and you can take your kids and stuff like that to not being dangerous. So yeah. So I got. Anybody got any questions or anything?
I got a question for you, Mark. Depth.
What?
Do they go deeper than 50 feet?
Yeah, oh, yeah. But when you catch them that deep, they like to dive. You can't get their swim bladder to decompress. So if you catch them that deep on accident, like if you're downlining that deep, usually that fish is going to die.
Do not fish striper bass.
What's that?
Do not fish striper bass.
Yeah. Don't do it.
Release striper bass. Except for the summertime. Get them down to 1
Let me give you, if you guys don't know, this is Ezel Cox. This is like one of the original guys that striper fishing. So I'm going to let him talk.
I don't think you take it. Sorry, I didn't mean to take it away from you. A great presentation. Very great.
We're gonna bring this over here
Very,
too.
very informative. I just appreciate coming and listening. Back to fizzing. Do not fizz striper bass. Expect them to. It does put them out of sight. They go to the
back
bottom
down.
and die. And lay there on the bottom to get them over the water.
So what's the best way to release it?
A deep release is a 4 or 5 ounce, 6 ounce sinker lead weight with a little hook on it,
Okay.
and you actually drop them down 32 feet on atmosphere. And if they're going to live, if you put them down near the thermal line where they came from, probably,
Okay.
and still some oxygen left at that.
Yeah, for them to survive.
That's the best survival we're going to have when releasing the striper bass in deep water lakes, for instance, North Cherokee Valley. Most likely thing you need to do is not get fish that you're not going
Correct.
to keep and use in the summer.
Yeah.
After the lake, after July and August, September, a lot of the time to release
Target in the
striper.
lake.
Even in cold water, unless they've had access to cold water below the release.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to butt in.
Oh no, you're good. Anything else you can think of we should add?
Maybe is that what I saw?
Yeah, this is just all these.
Is that the name of the?
Yeah.
So, hello. So for all the people watching on YouTube or Facebook, you guys asking all the time on videos, what am I using to see the bottom of the lakes? And that's just called Navionics. So we'll go back to these. You can literally Google Navionics web app, and that's what you can see right here. Let me see if I can. Let me bring this a little closer.
Go for it. Yeah, it's hard to see that.
Bring it a little closer. So, all of these maps for most of the lakes, the big ones throughout the country where Navionics has been, are available online for free. You just Google Navionics web app, and you can just go search your home lake for that. Like, this is how I learned how to fish. Like, I didn't have, when I first started out on the Bigfoot, I didn't have a depth finder. I didn't have anything. I just went off Navionics. I'm like, okay, based on these things I know about stripers or catfish, they should be on this type of structure this time of the year, and I would just fish it, like, without a depth finder. And like, I feel like I caught more fish back then than I do right now. I didn't have a video camera, I didn't tape anything back then, but like, I also stayed out there way longer. But like, this is the bread and butter of all fishing that I do, or any of these other guys, saltwater guys, like, everybody uses this right here. Like, you gotta learn this. If I gotta like hammer one thing home, don't even worry about the rods and reels or anything. It's learn how to do this. See, look, he's got it on his phone right there, Mr. Bobby. And like, you can just take that out on the lake if you like remotely know how to read one of these things and go catch fish. So if you take anything from this lecture or whatever you want to call it, learn how to do this.
Somebody on YouTube asked how you do it from the boat or from the bank.
Okay, so bank fishing for stripers.
Yeah.
That's bank fishing for stripers. It's hard, like it just is, because they move a lot, and sometimes they'll be in areas that are hard to do from the bank. But same thing you would do when you're catfishing. If you're in the winter months or fall or early spring, you're going to want to look for those ledges in the areas that there are catfish, or not catfish, stripers, and you can go and cut bait it. That's the best way to start out doing striper fishing. If you've never done it before, just go cut bait it like you're catfishing in areas that are going to hold stripers. And make sure your pole's in a rod hole or something, because if not, it's going to fly in the water. So another way to do it, if you're going to fish below a dam, and it's safe to do it, is throwing bucktails. That's the first way on artificials I learned how to catch them. So this is a bucktail. Generally, the heavier ones, the farther you can throw it, which is better from the bank, but it also gets snagged a whole lot easier. So it's like a give and take. And when you're throwing these bucktails below the dams in the boils, you're going to use like a surf rod with 30 to 60 pound test braids. You can zing it a mile. You're going to want to put a good leader on it, like 40 to 50. The smaller the main line, so if you go down to 20 or 30 pound braids, the further you can throw it. If you've got a boil that's way far away from you, and you want to try to catch it from the bank below a dam, you need a smaller diameter line, a long rod, and you need a reel that has good drag that's not going to strip out on you. Because the first one I caught below loud, and I hooked it at the boils and had to run all the way past the creek mouth. If you guys have ever seen that. So that's a good way to start doing it. And then another way to do it from the bank, during the warmer months when they're blowing bait up on top water, you gotta get there really early in the morning or late in the evening, sometimes at night. You throw these big walk the dog style baits. So this is just a KVD one or a Strike King or something like that, but they're heavy and they fly a mile. So you can throw those or pencil poppers, and you gotta be in there at the right time. So you gotta be low light levels, evening, early morning, or if it's really cloudy and overcast and storming, sometimes you'll get some top wire activity in the middle of the day. But weather-wise, the nastier it is normally, the better it is for striper fishing and catfish from what I've experienced. Anybody else got any questions?
No.
Anybody on here?
Somebody asked about black sallies as a bait fish, but that's about it.
Someone turn off the waterfall. Oh, I can't do that one. Okay. Well,
Somebody on here asked if you were going to skinny dip like the dude in Alabama.
I am not skinny dipping in that tank. You guys don't want to see that. You'll be blinded. But that's all I got. We made it about an hour. That's what I planned on it. So, yeah. That's Striper Fishing 101 from Agoogan. Thank you guys for watching and being here. Thank you for all you guys for being here, and Edel for coming and telling us about how to release deep water fish. I'm going to start having one of those in my boat so I can do that, because sometimes you'll get one to eat and you don't mean it to, it just happens, and we want to try to keep them alive if we can. So, yeah, thank you. Go catch some big fish, and we'll see you later.
Great job, Mark. Good job.
Woohoo!
Thank you.